the jury awarded Depp $15 million in compensatory damages, but also Amber Heard got $2 million. So it's they did split it a little bit.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Far short of what both of them were seeking, but not a slam dunk for either side necessarily. And of course, there is an alleged abusive relationship at the center of all this. Let's see if we can process what we heard and what this means. Let's bring back in our CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law professor, Jessica Levinson. Jessica, what did you hear? What does this mean?
Well, exactly what you said. This is a mixed verdict. It's interesting. As we were moving along, so there were 6 statements at issue, 3 on each side. And as we were moving along, after 4, I wrote to myself, this looks like a total repudiation. It looks like a full win for Depp and a complete repudiation of Heard. And then we have that one win for Heard, where the jury found that one of the 3 statements in the Daily Mail that was made about her was in fact defamatory. So my new takeaway after that was the jury found they both lied. Neither one comes out looking particularly good. And I will say this jury was careful. This verdict indicates that they really took every statement in isolation. They looked at the elements of the tort of defamation. They looked at the fact that they're public figures, that it's a higher standard of proof. We heard that you need to show actual malice. And they really took each in isolation. It wasn't just a statement of, we like Johnny Depp, we don't like Amber Heard. The fact that it's a mixed verdict indicates to me that the jury took their job very seriously. Of course, who comes out, I think, better, it's more of a win for Johnny Depp. He wins all 3 of these statements that he sued for defamation. Heard wins one of the 3. She gets less in damages. But again, the end of the day, I think the punchline is the jury found that they both lied.
Yeah, right. And the jury did find that, Heard acted with actual malice. I wonder, does that have a legal definition that relates to monetary damages?
It does. Well, not necessarily to monetary damages, but the legal definition is that when you sue for defamation and the suit is with respect to a public figure, that you can't just show that you should have known that the statement is false, that a reasonable person would have known that statement is false. It's a higher standard when it comes to public figures. So you have to show that you knew or you had reckless disregard of the falsity of the statement. And that's in part because once you're somebody who's part of the public forum, we think that you have the bully pulpit, you have a bullhorn to respond, to say, no, that isn't true, that we don't want to be as protective of you as maybe a private person who can't try and rectify the situation. But with respect to actual malice, I think it plays into what the jury decides, but a jury could find actual malice and still say $1 in compensatory damages.
Right. All right. Well, Jessica, stand by for a moment, if you will. We want to bring in CBS News correspondent Christina Ruffini, who is there outside the courthouse in Fairfax County, Virginia. Christina, what are you seeing? What kind of reaction is the crowd outside the courthouse displaying?
Well, it was very quiet as they started to read the verdict, and then as they came back with that first, the first reading, because each of these sections were split up into different questions, right? Was the statement false? And the jury found that yes, the statement was false, and then you heard a cheer from behind me. And then it was, was the statement indeed about Mr. Depp, as he had alleged in his defamation suit? And when the jury found that it was, you heard another cheer behind me. And then the part that you were just talking about, that real and actual malice, anyone who's been a journalist, anyone who's taken media law, that is a sentence that just makes your core shake, because that is the thing that has to be proven in order for you to sue. If you're a public figure, you have to be able to prove real and actual malice. That's from an old Supreme Court case that involved the New York Times. It's been a precedent for a long time. So as your legal expert was saying, the bar is higher. So that to me was when, you really knew that this was going, at least on those first few charges, in Depp's way. It was going to go Depp's way, and you heard behind me the crowd started chanting, Johnny, 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 and then there were more and more cheers. Now, as the verdict continued and it started to get a little muddier, it was a little more quiet. We haven't really heard much from them since, and that is very interesting that we had a split verdict, and that, it goes to what we were talking about earlier. This was messy, this was ugly, this was nasty on both sides, and it seems that this jury has recognized that, and even though it does seem that Johnny Depp has come out slightly on top. No one is, no one's emerging unscathed from this, and it's hard to find a good guy, I guess, when you're looking at something that, as we said, is just sad. The devolution of a marriage, allegations of this sort are just not happy, and the verdict is over. Hopefully that means people can start to move on, but the crowd behind me is still there waiting for Amber Heard, who is here, to come out.
It's a very good point, and it's a highlight on the issue of domestic violence among couples. Of course, a woman accusing a man is one thing. Johnny Depp made accusations that Amber Heard was abusive towards him. It really has put a spotlight on what is likely something many regular folks experience and don't have the resources to have these types of million-dollar cases.
Totally. I mean, I agree. Domestic violence is one thing and should be put in a box. But in these kinds of cases where you're looking at a marriage and it's messy like that, it's hard to. There are no heroes and villains. Do you know what I mean?
Nobody really wins.
Nobody wins. But instinctually, the public wants to say this is the good guy and this is the bad guy when it's really not that clear cut in real life.
Rachel Fiset is the co-founder and a managing partner of the LA law firm Zweiback, Fiset and Coleman. This was a civil case. It seems like each side got some level of compensatory damages. Any possibility based on this outcome, it could lead to either a criminal case or other types of appeals or something else down the line?
I definitely don't think this will lead to a criminal case. The jury in the civil case found basically that Amber Heard was lying about the abuse that she spoke about. So I don't think that in a higher standard, which would be the criminal case, that a jury would find that she was abused. So I think that forecloses that. And I actually don't think a criminal case was necessarily on the table anyway. But I think the jury flat out found that she was lying. And it's a pretty damning verdict when you think of that malice standard. A clear and convincing standard of malice means the jury believed that she lied about this in this publication to harm Johnny Depp.
Can I just ask you, how unusual of an outcome is this in cases like this?
Defamation is fairly difficult to prove, particularly when you are suing a public figure or when it is a public figure that's claiming the defamation, because there is a higher standard. You have that malice standard because public figures are talked about all the time. So they actually elevate the standard for a superstar like Johnny Depp or any type of public figure. So he had a pretty high burden to win this case. And he did.
I want to go back really quickly to our CBS News legal contributor, Jessica Levinson. Jessica, so now doing the math here, it seems like Amber Heard owes Johnny Depp $13 million, right? He was awarded $15 million. She was awarded $2 million, if I'm doing the math correctly. What if she doesn't have $12 million? I mean, what happens next? What realistically happens in terms of the exchange of money, or is all of that just symbolic?
No, it's not necessarily symbolic at all. So this is a remedies question. And the question is, if she says, look, I don't have it, it's not there, you can look in my bank accounts, then we can talk about things like garnishing her wages when it comes to future employment. I'm having a memory that I'm sure will feel like ancient history to some people of the O.J. Simpson trial and the civil case where he was in fact found liable for the deaths. And what happened in that case is he said, look, I don't have the money. And we've had a lengthy fight about trying to obtain the money for the victim. That's not an unusual situation where somebody says, I can't fulfill this. And so I certainly think because she has high earning potential, we could be looking to see maybe the next time that she is employed, maybe the next time she earns a lot of money, part of that will have to go to the settlement.
Can I ask, because much of this we've spoken about has been an issue debated in the court of public opinion, and we had already spoken before this verdict that in many ways Johnny Depp had come out looking better than Amber Heard because much of his position was corroborated by others, her claims were not. Is there a scenario at all where the Depp team might turn around now and say, we won the case, you owe us the money, but don't worry about it, so to speak?
Well, so what can you do with a jury verdict? I mean, Johnny Depp could decide to say, pay me and I'll pay you right back. You're going to pay me and I'm going to give it to charity. So, and excuse me, I said settlement, not verdict. We are talking about a verdict here. That would be much more likely in a settlement where he would say, look, I've vindicated myself. My job here is done. So even though the arbitrator or the mediator said, found in favor of me, let's say that 0 is fine. I think in this case, it'd be much more likely to see him potentially say, I'm giving this to a charity for domestic violence. That would probably get him more PR points.
But Jessica, you made the point earlier that her future earnings could be docked, but these are celebrities, right? And one of the reasons that Johnny Depp brought this case against Amber Heard to begin with is that he claimed her allegations were affecting his future employment prospects, right? So it's not at all clear that Amber Heard has stellar employment prospects in Hollywood after this.
It's not at all clear. And I didn't mean to imply, of course, she can just pick up the phone and she'll be able to satisfy this judgment. And we certainly do have judgments throughout the country where they do stand unsatisfied, where the jury says you owe this much money and the other side has just never paid that. But I will say, if we were, for instance, suing somebody who was engaged in a different line of work, $2 million might seem completely outlandish. It is possible that over the course of her career, although, again, we don't know what's going to happen to her career prospects, that she would be able to satisfy this.
Jessica Levinson, thank you so much. We want to cross over to our correspondent outside the courthouse, Christina Ruffini, who's been listening and hearing some of the reaction from so many people who have been following this in person. Christina, what can you tell us now? Is the mood any different? Fewer people? What's up? What's going on?
It's about the same. The crowd seems to be holding. And actually, as we were standing here, I was telling you people were like piling in here to try to get here for the reading. I saw a young woman literally sprinting up past us all the way up the hill. She missed it, but she was trying to get there. We've seen interest. Our interest is high. Passions are high. Passions were high outside the courthouse, inside the courthouse throughout this entire thing. But, as we've been talking about, this is not just about this case as much as it, the verdicts should only apply to the case that they're decided for. But there's always a spillover effect. So what we're going to have to look for is, do we start to see in more high-profile divorces? Is it, there's always lawsuits, there's always courts, but is it less about divorce court now? And do people start suing each other then for the statements that people have made in divorce court? It could get continuously more messy. One of the things I was thinking about as we were standing here is, remember, we had that false start where the judge came in and told the jury they had to fix the paperwork because they hadn't put down anything for compensatory damages. And we assumed that was related to the Depp part of the trial. But now if you think about it, it seems the most logical explanation for that was because they awarded, they didn't award any they awarded the $2 million to Amber Heard, but no compensatory damages. The jury, it seems, most likely forgot to put that 0 in the line, and I'll leave it to our legal experts, but I think that's probably what was going on there. But, as we said, it was a surprise that it was a split verdict, but it goes to prove that they thought, yes, she was lying, yes, she knew she was lying, yes, she acted with real and actual malice, but he didn't tell the whole truth either. Right.
It's interesting because the scene you're describing out there, Christina, sounds like it's mostly pro-Depp. Are you seeing any sort of Team Heard people out there outside the courthouse?
I haven't seen them here today, but, I did see a bit of a pushback on Twitter today. And again, it was about this concern for domestic violence victims. But there's another side to that as well, and that's men who are victims of domestic violence. And there have been men's groups saying, look, the fact that Johnny Depp was coming forward and saying he was a domestic violence victim, that is a good thing for men, feeling like, they are strong if they come forward. They don't have to be ashamed of what's happened to them. They can take their cases to police officers and won't be laughed out, because if this big star like Johnny Depp can do it, you can do it too. So there's all different facets of this, and there's all different teams, and there's all different sides, and that's certainly what we've seen. And now we're going to have to sit back and see where this fallout lands and where it goes. I think that's an interesting point, what he decides to do with the money. It would make the most sense, I would say, to donate it to some sort of domestic victims charity, because there is a bit of a backlash about a lot of the vitriol and a lot of the memes and a lot of the internet hatred towards Amber Heard. However you feel about her, she is a real person. So that might mitigate some of that in the public eye. And since for Johnny Depp, this was mostly about the public eye and mostly about, recapturing his community and his fans and proving himself as the person many of them thought they were in his mind, that would be a way to take that kind of over the finish line. I would imagine his PR team. Look, I'm not an entertainment reporter, but there's a lot of crisis communications here in Washington I've dealt with over the past couple decades, and that seems like the move, at least from where I'm standing here on this lawn.
Christina, thank you. Let's cross now to Rachel Fiset, who's been watching this happen with all of us. And I'll just say, as the sole male on this panel, it does jump out to me the point Christina made about there are men who have allegations of abuse against their partners, and they're just too embarrassed, quite frankly, to come forward and say as much. What do you make of the outcome, and does this have an impact on other folks who don't have as many resources, perhaps following in Depp's footsteps here?
I agree that it may have an impact. I think the impact is more on women generally, that they should not come out because Johnny Depp was a clear winner. So I think that is a little bit more of the impact that is likely. But I agree. I don't know if a regular old man, and nothing against you, would have the same kind of star power in fighting this kind of case. I think Johnny Depp brings a certain star power. He brings something with him in the way he's fought it and the way that this case went down, and he connected with the public and the jury. So I would venture to say that the more likely impact is that women would be discouraged to speak out and use their First Amendment rights to free speech as it relates to domestic violence. Or maybe it has no impact at all, and in this case, they just found that she wasn't being
Rachel,
truthful.
to your point, it could have a chilling effect on women who have legitimate domestic violence complaints and don't have as many resources as these actors. I mean, that's a horrible thing to kind of consider.
That's the fear. The fear is that she was met with such hatred, with such vitriol, and a clear loss when she spoke up. And that is the fear, is the chilling effect that women won't feel comfortable in bringing these types of allegations forward.
But Rachel, in some ways, that's the whole problem with this circus, if you will, around this trial, because we're talking about two Hollywood celebrities, right? So it's very hard to extrapolate what this means for the average Joe and Jane, right, who is going through a divorce. In some ways, we want it to represent so much more than it is. These are two celebrities. It's very specific.
It's very specific, and it's very high profile, and it feels like it's not particularly relatable to average people. So if it is taken as an anomaly, in the anomaly, frankly, that it is, then hopefully everybody continues on as they are. It's just that it is so high profile. And frankly, the op-ed wasn't particularly devastating towards Johnny Depp. She wasn't running his name through the mud over and over again. It was more about her experience as someone who believed she suffered domestic violence, that it would have the chilling effect, because she was just speaking up, saying she met a wrath, and again, she met a wrath. So that's the fear, but this case is a clear anomaly.
I kept thinking when we were watching the trial, here are two actors on the stand, both telling their version of the story. And there was a lot of he said, she said, right? Exactly. The same situations described very differently by each individual. And you can't help but wonder, well, these are professional actors, right? So how much of this is them acting? How much of them is telling the truth? There's just no way of knowing.
We see a little bit of activity outside the courthouse. Perhaps some of the legal teams will address the press. Christina Ruffini is there, keeping track of how things have changed since the jury announced its verdict. $15 million being awarded to Johnny Depp, $2 million to Amber Heard. Christina, what's happening now?
Well, as we've been waiting, Amber Heard has released a statement on Instagram. I'm going to read it for you guys right now, but, bear with me. Okay, it says, "The disappointment I feel today is beyond words. I'm heartbroken that the mountain of evidence still was not enough to stand up to the disproportionate power, influence, and sway of my ex-husband. I'm even more disappointed," she writes, with what this verdict means for other women. It is a setback. It sets back the clock to a time when a woman who spoke up and spoke out could be publicly shamed and humiliated. She writes, "It sets back the idea that violence against women is to be taken seriously. I believe Johnny's attorney succeeded in getting the jury to overlook the key issue of freedom of speech and ignore evidence that was so conclusive that we won in the United Kingdom. I'm sad I lost this case," she says, "but I am sadder still that I seem to have lost a right I thought I had as an American to speak freely and openly." So that's what's just come out on Instagram. That's a lot to digest, but it goes to some of the issues we've been talking about, and we'll have to see what comes in the days and weeks to come. As you said, we're waiting for the attorneys to step out behind us. So far, it's been nothing much. I don't know, maybe she was back there writing this or at least posting it, waiting before she came out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure there will be an outpouring on social media. It'll be interesting to see how Johnny Depp reacts to this. As we know, he is not there. We're assuming he's heard of the verdict by now, but he could be in rehearsal or shooting a scene, who knows? So it'll be interesting to see what his reaction is.
Thank you, Christina. Let's quickly ask Rachel
Fiset,
because with that information Christina just reported, Amber Heard is still saying that his attorney succeeded in getting the jury to overlook the key issue of free speech and ignore evidence that was so conclusive, she says. So this perhaps gives us a hint that she insists she was accurate. Does this provide any legal liability if she continues to say, "I did not lie, I told the truth"?
I don't think so. I think that there is a privilege in litigation as it relates to your case, and those kinds of statements would be considered under that privilege. And so she has the freedom to say, I believed my case, and I believe this was decided wrongly. So that she should be completely in the clear on that type of statement.
All right. And Rachel, we are, as you know, waiting for both teams of the attorneys to come out, make a statement. What do you think Heard's lawyers will say?
I think they will echo her comments. I think they will say that this is a sad day for domestic abuse survivors. I think that they will continue to believe that they had this correct, and they will say the jury got it wrong. I mean, that's what I think they will. I think they will. They're not going to back down simply because they lost the case.
And as you said earlier, no chance for an appeal.
I don't see a chance for appeal on this, but if they can, I don't see a chance, but they may come up with an argument as it relates to, again, focusing on exactly the free speech element of this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Rachel Fiset, thank you so much for your time. We also heard from our correspondent, Christina Ruffini, outside the courthouse, and Jessica Levinson, our CBS News legal contributor, as we all just watched live the jury verdict here in the Depp-Heard trial. A real split decision, Depp being awarded $15 million, Amber Heard being awarded $2 million, with the issue of domestic violence at the core.
I think, and it just speaks to the messiness of human relationships, right? I mean, at the end of the day, this is about two people, about a marriage that went horribly wrong, and that there are a lot of different perspectives to how that marriage went wrong. It's sad. It's very sad. I mean, we look at it, from up high. They look like sort of, Olympian gods, but they're really just people. And this is, it's tragic to see a marriage unravel that way. And I think the jury listened very carefully to both sides. And that's probably why they came up with that mixed decision, even though they did seem to weigh more heavily in Johnny Depp's favor.